Throw away the textbooks. Toss them away. Now, you don't have to do that literally right now, okay? We'll just write this down. We're going to talk about these, right? Okay. Toss out textbooks. We're going to talk about why in a minute. So if you're saying that doesn't make any sense, that's okay. There's background to all these ideas. All right, so we have two of them now. Actually, the order might be slightly wrong there, because actually that's the second idea he talked about. But that's okay. We don't even worry about order necessarily. What's the other one? Yes?
Assign a subject that teacher hated.
Assign, not necessarily hated, but let's be a little less strong. But what would had challenges with? Fair enough. I'll go along with that. Okay, so let teachers teach subjects they had trouble with. In other words, when they took the subject, trouble with. Can everybody read that? In the back, can we read that? Jean, can you read that? Okay. Sarah, can you read that? Oh, I'm on the phone talking to my girlfriend. Okay. Sorry, Sarah. Didn't want to interrupt your conversation with your girlfriend. Marcin, can you read it?
Of course.
Okay, so we're good.
My eyesight.
Everybody can read it. Now, if we look at this, these three ideas, let's be honest. Let's be honest. Let's take a look at those three ideas. You would have to say that these don't match the conventional wisdom in education at all, do they? Right? I don't know if you're familiar, and I'm going to put that term up there and talk about it, with the conventional wisdom. Let me write that down. Conventional wisdom. And I'll put these kind of quotes, which means it's kind of an idea that people have, right? Okay? It's not a quote as in quote marks. Now, the conventional wisdom, there's a guy, actually a Canadian economist by the name of John Kenneth Galbraith, who served in several administrations, several American presidents. I believe Kennedy, I'm not sure, I think Nixon. I don't know how many, I don't know all the different presidents, but he served in maybe 3, maybe 4 administrations. Fairly well respected man. He talked about the conventional wisdom, and what it is it's, if you put this down, if you're not sure what conventional wisdom means, write common way of thinking. I'm not going to put that on the board, okay, but just write that in your book beside it so you understand what it means. Common way of thinking means that in any field, remember we talked last week about assumptions, right? Not the university, okay? The assumptions you make about things. In any field, whether it be science, a scientific endeavor, whether it be sports, it doesn't matter, whether it be specific sport, football, whatever. There's certain ways of doing things that we don't question very often. That we say, this is how this field is, this is how it works, right? Galbraith called those ideas the conventional wisdom. Now, he was very, very critical of it, actually. Galbraith was not a fan of the conventional wisdom. What he actually said is that in society, we pay, mostly actually in those days, men, and still to a large extent men, although that is changing, but we pay lots and lots of money for people to move up through the ranks and get to the top of anything, whether it be a chief executive officer in business, or a congressman, or a member of parliament, if you're talking about the Thai context, okay, or whether it be someone that is running a large organization like an NGO, it doesn't matter. But we pay people and move up through the ranks. And when they get to the top of their organization, okay, they are in charge of the conventional wisdom. What does that mean? It means they have, like, it's kind of like having it in your pocket, almost like this phone, right? I got all the information, and it's right here in my pocket, and I'm in charge. And as long as this contains the accepted way of doing things, then I can control you because I have all this in my pocket. Does that make sense? Now, Galbraith's idea is he says this is ridiculous because there's people who can challenge any field. There's always somebody who can tell you a better way of doing it. Right? Well, what Postman's doing is every one of these is a direct challenge to the conventional wisdom. And it's interesting because if he talks about his difficulty being heard at the early part of the book, well, I'm actually surprised that he's gotten even one word published Okay? To be honest with you. Because he goes against most of what we stand for in education, yet his ideas, I think you'll find as we talk about them, are quite valuable. Toss out the textbooks. Of course there's good textbooks out there. Why does he say get rid of the textbooks? What's wrong with the textbooks?
They limit the teacher, maybe?
How do they limit a teacher? Okay, and let's go, we'll get Marcin first and then we'll get Evan, okay? Just a second. Thank you for I want to catch you in a second. Marcin, what was it?
They limit the teacher, I think.
How?
Because they don't explain everything in every way, possible way, you know, kind of
okay, so they straitjacket.
So, yeah.
They straitjacket the teacher with a certain way of thinking, and they
also
straitjacket the
blindly,
students.
They force you to follow a certain pattern, maybe, you know, how to teach the students in what order.
Okay, good. Evan?
Yeah, it says here that most textbooks are badly written, and it seems like it's becoming boring, you know, for the students.
Yeah, right. Lack of a personal voice is mentioned in there, which goes into that. Yes, please, Michael.
And he said later that they're presenting facts as if they can't be disputed.
As facts that are beyond dispute, right? Beyond dispute. Now, this is so interesting because I'll give you an example of that. Okay, here, this is a true example from the world of history, and a lot of you will be familiar with this. Do we have any Khmer people in here? Anybody from Cambodia in here tonight? No? That's okay. But if you look at, how many of you are familiar with a guy named Pol Pot? You know who he is? Put up your hands if you know who Pol Pot is. Pol Pot was the leader of an organization called the Khmer Rouge. In Thai, it's considered Khmer Dang. Okay? And now, basically, what he did is he terrorized the population of Cambodia for about 5 years. Okay? And he went in and he had this vision that they were going to create this agricultural society. The only problem was, in order to create the agricultural society, they needed to kill everybody that was not in favor of farming as a way of life, which meant that they need to kill all the university professors, and they need to kill everybody that is in the cities, and they need to kill everybody that likes to read, because in his vision of things, although actually farmers, a lot of them are readers, but in his vision of things, he didn't want farmers that read. Okay, so he went through and they did that. And it wound up being a third of the population of Cambodia was annihilated. Okay? Now, after about 4 or 5 years of this absolute terror, the worst thing you could possibly imagine, right? The Vietnamese actually came in and liberated the people of Cambodia from the Khmer Rouge. Now, there were several reasons why they did it. Some of it may have been humanitarian, but part of it was actually driven by the fact that the Khmer Rouge kept attacking them. The Khmer Rouge army went across the border. They used to go in raids into Vietnam every now and then, and the Vietnamese got tired of it. Okay? But they actually went in and actually liberated the Cambodian people. Now, you won't find that in any American textbook anywhere, even today. Okay? This is 1975, what, 35 years later? You won't find that in a textbook anywhere. Does anybody know why? That's okay. I'll tell you why. The reason why you won't find it is because the American government at the time was just finishing, actually, a vicious and brutal war with the Vietnamese people. And so, the Americans backed the Khmer Rouge against the Vietnamese. Knowing what a brutal regime it was, and the reason they did that is because their political enemies were the Vietnamese, because they just finished a war with them. Now, realistically, everything America stands for, if you talk about individual rights, if you talk about giving people the right to have a say in their lives, if you talk about equality between the sexes, if you talk about racial equality, all of the values of the American politic, and I'm not denigrating those. Those are real. The American people really do believe in those things. That's a fact. I'm not making that up. But all of the ideas and ideals were actually on the side of the Vietnamese. And yet, the Americans backed the Khmer Rouge. Now, why do I talk about this? Because if you think about textbooks, I will tell you, you won't find, if you want to teach American kids how to understand this issue better, it's not in the textbooks. You can't get it from a textbook. So often textbooks, not only are they badly written, They often obscure truths. And there's various reasons why that happened. I mean, I'm not blaming the textbook writers. Politically, okay, if a textbook writer came out and said those things in a book, they couldn't get published. And they wouldn't be able to sell it to the schools. Okay? So it's, you can criticize whoever you want. But the point is, if you want to teach kids the truth about issues, you got to go beyond textbooks. You got to teach them to do some research on their own. You got to teach them to challenge some of the assumptions. And every culture has its blind spots. I'm picking that example because it's very easy and it's something that a lot of you are familiar with. Okay? Because many of you in here are involved in being people that are, I don't know what you want to say, on a side of that conflict. I don't like talking about sides, but you're people that maybe some of you know Vietnamese people, some of you probably are Vietnamese. Okay? Some of you, I'm sure, have Cambodian friends. Thailand, which tried to take some of these people in, had to deal with the NGOs in Thailand that were trying to let some of these people come in. The Americans put pressure on the Thais to stop that, and so the Thais stopped doing it because they didn't want to. It was, you know, it's not smart even today. I mean, it's not smart to go up against the Americans because the Americans have a lot of power politically in the world, and they could do things to you in terms of trade and other things. So the Thais backed off of that. They stopped helping the Khmer people because of that pressure. So, and this is not fiction. You can look all this up. I'm not making any of this up. And again, I also subscribe to this. Errors are universal. The truth is, these go together. Because you want to know what? I probably made some mistakes in some of what I just said. Right? I'm sure there was some. I think basically it's a factual picture of what happened. But undoubtedly, I'm not a historical expert. Okay? And I probably have my own biases in there somewhere too. So there's probably some mistakes. He says, Neil says, or Postman says, if you're doing this with your students, what do? Every student should be part of, what did he call it? Advancement for academia, something like this?
Accuracy.
Accuracy in academia. Thank you for that correction. And what are you supposed to do? You put all your students in this group at the beginning of the semester, and what are they supposed to do?
Pick out your mistakes.
Pick out your mistakes. Absolutely. And you heard me in here commend people like David and Mark because they challenge me on things. I like that. That's valuable. That is extremely valuable. And you know what? You should probably be doing the same thing with your students. Okay? And you know what? It's also, not only is it good for showing the students that all of you are human, including the teacher. And you do not possess, you're not the sage on the stage, you're not an absolute possessor of all knowledge. That's one thing. But you know what else it does? I've seen this many times where I've screwed something up and a student's corrected me and I've thanked them for correcting me. What do you think happens to how that student feels about themselves? How do you think? Lakshmi, what do you think? Proud. Yeah, he's proud, his feelings about himself, his self-esteem goes up. And another thing, remember we talked about self-esteem and self-efficacy and how they're different, but they support each other. And I think who was it that mentioned, was it you that mentioned that that they're very connected, even though they are different, right? But you know, self-esteem, which is how you feel about yourself, and self-efficacy, which is your skill in performing a role, right? You get a solid boost on both of those. Anytime you correct a teacher, the teacher recognizes it. And you know what so many teachers do? I've been in classes and I've seen it, and they blow it out and say, oh yeah, okay, that's wrong. You know, because either their ego might be involved, they don't want to feel bad that they made a mistake, or possibly they think it's a trivial issue. But to the kid, it's not a trivial issue, right? If a kid corrects you on something, the best attitude to have, to be quite honest, if their correction is correct, okay, is gratitude. Is show gratitude for that, and make the correction, and recognize that they've done it. You know what? It doesn't bring you down in their eyes. It does not. That's the fear that teachers have, is it will bring them down in the student's eyes. No, it won't. It will do the reverse. Okay? Kids will say, and even at a very young age, kids will say, wow, that teacher really has something going. That teacher listens to me and treats me as a person. Okay? Because one of the top criticisms you always get with kids is that they're not treated, they're not respected in the classroom. It's one of the biggest